Welcome to the Pen Leader Podcast, where strategic leaders get straight to the topics, strengthening our awareness and sharpening our minds. The Pen Leader Podcast is produced by Roar, a production division of Mays & Associates Ltd. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Now here is your award-winning host, Dr. Shanda Gore.
And welcome back to the Pen Leader Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about elevating voices. And I have the distinct pleasure to have with me Dr. Tracee Perryman, who is the CEO and co-founder of the Center of Hope Family Services, where she has developed evidence-based programming for positive youth development that empowers families and communities. She has a doctorate of philosophy and social work and a minor in education. She's a licensed professional counselor, and she works so much on making time to support the mental and emotional wellness of children, not only in the local area, but she writes books that are reaching out beyond her local resources. She's authored 3 books and published through Forbes Advantage Publishing. Her latest book is Elevating Women Leaders, Stories of Strength, Survival, and Success. And again, her other 2 books are in that same theme of elevating. So with that said, I'd like to welcome Dr. Tracee Perryman. Welcome, Dr. Perryman.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So the first question I'm going to ask, you have done so much and you're so accomplished. And what are you passionate about?
So I am passionate about going through life, observing people, observing their gifts and talents, and then providing the platform for those talents to grow and flourish. That's what I wake up every day excited. And I think that passion has been birthed out of just my life experience. From the time I was very young, I never felt like there was anything I couldn't accomplish. And I never felt like there was anything I couldn't try. And I never had to be afraid to fail. And from my earliest years, my parents embraced my gifts, but they were very clear to provide a space for me to refine them and then watch them grow. So I guess my work is rooted in my life experience and just wanting to share that opportunity with as many people as I encounter.
And you've touched the lives of so many, now thousands of children and now women through your success. Can you talk a little bit about what you would consider your biggest accomplishment as a leader?
So I would say my biggest accomplishment probably is Center of Hope Family Services, my life's work. And I say that because I've lived a life where my personal gifts were embraced and I had opportunities to grow those gifts. However, with Center of Hope, we started with nothing. No money, no resources, no building, just an idea. And we were in an extremely saturated marketplace where I didn't fit the prototype for a nonprofit director or CEO. So I think the underdog story probably is the most compelling in my mind. And I also feel proudest about Center of Hope because it's bigger than just my success. You know, it's one thing to win an award. It's one thing to win a recognition. But it's another thing, put in place the resources for children now, almost 50% of them out of the door reading and doing math at grade level when they started at 13% or 20% in math and reading. So that I'm very proud of. And then also spending a lot of time investing in the leadership of our employees and finally watching that grow. Taking the time to scale back and think about character, right? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes in nonprofit work, the focus is, do we have the resources? What are the deliverables? What are the outcomes? And sometimes people get lost in the conversation. And oftentimes when people come into nonprofits, they're already skeptical because some of the ethics around human resources and around even pay and around time spent on projects has been compromised. And so dealing with that level of distrust, people who have been burnt before, coming into our space and wondering if it's going to be the same kind of experience, being able to change those perceptions has been wonderful. providing a space for people to feel safe, for people to feel open, for people to work on their leadership skills. And now walking out of this school year where 100%, we retained 100% of our classroom aides in an era where it is very difficult to retain educators or paraprofessionals.
Right.
Those are things that I'm proud of, not just because I accomplished something, but because the people who are impacted by Center of Hope are growing and they're flourishing and they're shining and they're becoming accomplished as well.
Yeah, I would say that it is so hard not only to recruit individuals, but to retain them in any position. It has really gone across the board. So it's a rare gem to hear a positive retention rate, especially when we're talking about education and with little ones, because I know there was a mass exodus of teachers and professionals that just left and said, we just can't do this anymore. And COVID, unfortunately, really started that up and really pushed a lot of teachers out. So really kudos to you for your, again, calculating those measurables, because sometimes it's hard. They'd say, well, these are intangibles, but they're not. I mean, knowing that the children can read on the way out the door is a measurable. You can measure that and you can see it.
Absolutely. And it takes the intangibles to create the tangibles. You have to create the conditions for success first before you'll actually see the outcomes work in your favor. But you have to have a sound knowledge through the research and experience of what those conditions and what those intangibles are, and not using intangibles as a crutch or an excuse.
It's so true. I've seen a number of, they say they're studies, but you don't see the research behind it. You don't see the numbers. I know our firm gets very involved in survey work. It's so critically important to survey, to measure, and then to make action items based on what you think you're seeing out of that information. So very important. You have these 3 books that are themed with elevating. Can you talk about your recent speaking engagements and what you're hoping that those that are attending your speaking engagements can get out of your message?
So my most recent speaking engagement was speaking for the Women's Leadership Summit in conjunction with the Dana Open, which was an extreme honor and frankly a surprise. Not anything I was expecting. And it was an extremely positive event. I was very, very, very warmed by the response I received. You really don't know what to expect when you enter a space. And then with my personality, which is somewhat out of the box, that also makes you wonder, how you'll be received. And so one thing about that event is I decided to walk in authentically as myself. I resisted kind of the recipe for these sort of events, keep it very neutral. We use the data, we use structure, but I really wanted my personality to shine through. And the reason why is because in this chapter of my life, it is very important for me to inspire women to be audacious. And I tell this story a lot. In my young years, I stewed instead of choosing to speak. And a lot of relationships corroded because I didn't want to speak. I felt I didn't have the energy to deal with the fallout. Not that I was afraid of the fallout, but as women, we start thinking about all of these responsibilities we need to meet, and we're like, is the lemon worth the squeeze? And so we always say the lemon's not worth the squeeze. And sometimes we let things build out of control. So either we become bitter, we become insecure, or eventually we blow our top. And so my hope is to really inspire women to come on out and be themselves. You are strong enough to deal with the fallout. You're strong enough to deal with the pushback. You are smart enough to pick your battles. You're smart enough to be strategic. You're smart enough to put the pieces in place to move on if you need to. But definitely in this next phase is for women to speak up for themselves, for their needs at work, for their self-care, and to have the courage to separate themselves from any relationship, business or otherwise, that does not serve them.
That's interesting because you do the messaging for children, but you're also doing it for women, trying to make sure that elevating and uplifting them too. I think encourage them to step out. I was just speaking with someone about the courage to take the step, to have the faith in yourself as well, that you can do it. And sometimes it's, if you've got an environment that's not allowing you to speak, that's stewing. It was a very good metaphor. I think of a pot stewing eventually is going to boil over. And so I think that there's an opportunity there to think about it. And there's a self-reflection and a self-awareness that you need to have to be able to do that. What are the qualities do you look for when you're hiring your staff, and especially with working with children? What is it what are the qualities for those that need to lead little people?
So one question that I learned the hard way that I now ask in interviews, so many times a potential candidate will say, I love children. And one of the questions I ask is, what do you love about children? People don't realize oftentimes that you can love children and not be in love with teaching them life skills, engaging in their self-care, or educating them. It might just be an advocate, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people don't have a clear sense of their patience level with children. I also lean into asking questions about developmental appropriateness, and do they know what is appropriate for each age level? Those are things that are very critical in providing quality programming to children. I also ask about their interests, because I look for alignment between their interests and interests that will resonate with children. I also ask them about special gifts or talents and abilities, because what I find is when people can bring their gifts and abilities to the teaching experience, they're more likely to engage and buy in. Also, I think interviewing is one of those things that, there's been a lot of research on the topic, and so people are adept at saying what they need to say to get the job many times. So I think that you just have to watch people as well. And this year we had 100% retention. There have been times where there was a lot of turnover because we do not tolerate people who are not here for the children and who do not perform with excellence. And so there have been many times where we had to have those conversations. And I think what's good about it is that we stuck to our mission to the point where people finally figured out their mission and their value for excellence is not going to change. It doesn't matter what kind of culture we bring. It doesn't matter what kind of attitudes we bring. It doesn't matter how we don't perform. It doesn't matter how we gossip, and it doesn't matter how we try to tear down. They're going to stick to the mission even if they have to do the work themselves. So I think there's a lot of things that have contributed to where we are. And I think asking good questions, knowing what we're looking for, and also sticking to our mission no matter what. So now people who are also mission driven, those who buy in, and those who are ethically motivated are staying.
I think across the board, if you can find staff, team members, employees, it doesn't matter if you're in education or if you're in any of the industries, what you just said about staying on mission, making sure that you know that this is what you're here for, not any of the other business and shenanigans. That's what my mother used to call shenanigans. Don't need that. What we're focused on getting our role, fulfilling our role. And in this situation, it's a commitment to the children. But I think that says a lot across any industry, that this is what you're looking for. I know when we talk about that Penn Leader model, we talk about the sharpness, the education and the experience. Of course, you're looking at that, but I think you're also talking about that strength of character, ethics, and then you have a plan. You have a roadmap already. So that's being straight on path, and then pivot, of course, when you need to. So it sounds like what you're doing is definitely right in that same model too.
Agreed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you, because you've written books and you're involved in publishing, what are you reading and watching?
So I tend to read a lot of peer-reviewed journals and works just because, as an educator and a nonprofit leader, we have to stay ahead of the current trends. What's happening in education? What's going to happen with the fiscal cliff now that a lot of the recovery funds are expiring? What's on the horizon there? I love the Harvard Business Review. I think, and I'll tell you why. They tackle issues of leadership, but their structure they always tell you the data and the science. They tell you what the research literature says, but they often use personal profiles and personal stories to help you apply the research to specific situations. So that is my go-to. I'm a subscriber. Absolutely love that. Get the alerts every morning. I live for it. So that's my favorite. As far as what I'm watching, I'm constantly watching YouTube because I am a musician performer. So I'm always watching to see, I watch to see what happened with the Essence Festival because we learn, in terms of our delivery, in our performances, what's happening, what are they using, how are they moving, how are they pacing themselves. And I also like to watch artists to see how they sing the same song, right? Like when you see them in different venues, because there are times I'm an asthmatic, I have a lot of allergies. There are days that your voice will not do what the recording has done. And in my earlier years of performing, I always felt that pressure. And now, everyone Facebook Live, so I'm like, oh my goodness, this is being recorded. But watching how the pros, and I finally figured out they don't sing the same song the same way. They do what they feel. So yeah, I'm always watching. I love to watch the Tiny Desk concerts too. Those are my favorite.
So now we know what you're doing. You've written, I think, over 30 pieces that have been published.
Yes, 30 songs. Yep.
Yes. So you're out and about. You're writing. You're obviously leading, but you're also singing your way into leadership. So really kudos on that and having that creative side too.
Thank you. That's what I live for. And I think as a product of the Black church, gifts were always embraced, right? And African American churches, you could be a school principal and you could also be the head chef in the culinary committee, or you could teach Sunday school, or you could be the choir director. And so a part of my African American experience showed me that we could be holistic. Your gifts can be interrelated. You don't have to fit into one specific category. And so I still am very involved in the arts within our programs for that reason. And, some people have said, okay, well, if you're supposed to be the director, why are you in the middle of the theater? Because I think it's very important for children to see that you don't have to be one or the other. And there are 8 different smarts for a reason. And that gives them the opportunity to feel validated if they are not the most avid reader at the time. That if they can sing, or if they can dance, or if they are good at sports, or they're good at horticulture, they're just as valuable as the child who is a reading or math whiz.
I think valuing those other smart areas is critically important. And that takes all of us to raise that up and have that conversation. Take those gifts, see those gifts, uncover them, and then nurture them. Don't stifle them. Excellent. Well, I can't thank you enough just for coming on the show and sharing your leadership and those nuggets of information, especially from your great speaking engagement. I was glad to be able to experience it, and I know the hundreds of individuals that attended, both women and men, heard you speak, and I know that they were encouraged and inspired too.
Thank you so much.
So for our listeners out there, please make sure that you're subscribing and liking the podcast. If you have any suggestions, any feedback, please don't forget to send in a communication to info@MaysAssociatesLtd.com. And of course, until next time.
The Pen Leader podcast is hosted by Dr. Shanda Gore and brought to you by Mays & Associates Ltd., creating customized solutions for growth in the areas of leadership development, strategic planning, and culture building. Find out more at www.MaysAssociatesLtd.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Pen Leader podcast and share with others.